that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to the broadcast of Time for Hemp at Tumblr, SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, and, of course, iHeartRadio. I would encourage you to share us with your friends. You can also go to the Android App Store at Google and download our app into your phone. And as always, we ask that you share us with your friends. It is Wednesday, and on Wednesday we pay a big salute to all the hardworking activists at LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP.cc. I would encourage you to go to their website, check it out, and find a speaker to bring to your neck of the woods to help open the minds about the need to end prohibition. Want to give a big shout out to all of my friends up in Canada and say thank you to KDK Distributors for being nice enough to give us a grant to keep us loud, proud, and strong. Want to remind you that we are a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week broadcasting network with a team of people who are dedicated to getting the message out about re-legalizing marijuana for paper, fiber, fuel, and medication. We ask that you share this broadcasting network with your friends. I'm going to pass this joint conversation over to my joint host and let him and our joint friend have a nice joint chat here on the Big Joint Broadcast. Don't forget, anytime you hear the word joint on the Big Joint Broadcast, nearly 2.5 million people all around the world pack their bongs, their vaporizers, and twist up a joint and smoke out here at Time for Hemp. Your Honor?
Casper, how are you today?
I am feeling pretty groovy. I'm working on my joint medication. I'm taking care of my joint relief.
Wise, wise. I'm going to introduce our LEAP speaker guest, Ted Nelson, Theodore Nelson, shortly. But before I started, I thought it important to remind us all that not only does my co-host, Casper Leitch, have street creds, he is the street.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me as a co-host.
Because I have been told that I look like 50 miles of bad road, so that's probably true.
Today, the famous and infamous Casper Leitch and me, Lenny Freeling, have the pleasure of having a guest, Theodore Ted Nelson. Ted, rather than me going through your credentials, let me ask leading questions as lawyers are trained to do. Do you have prior law enforcement experience?
Yes, I do.
And have you ever served in law enforcement on the street level?
Yes, I have.
And in addition to that, did you move up the chain? Did you move up the ladder?
It was a short ladder for me.
Could you give us a description of that rapid rise?
I became a Michigan State Police trooper in 1974 as a young man, 21 years old, and I worked the road as a trooper in Detroit and in a rural area for about 11 years. And then I became promoted and as a sergeant, had some different assignments, and I ended up into narcotics work, interdiction and conspiracy enforcement, which involved being assigned to a team looking for drugs coming into the state via different ways, such as airports, bus stations, parcel post packaging, And then also assigned to work conspiracy cases involving large-scale organizations that took a lot of time to investigate. And I got very involved in asset seizure and forfeiture, and I was the primary instructor for not only the state police, but all the departments around the state, going around the state teaching part of the program called Operation Pipeline, which was to try to find drugs that are being couried across the highways and coming into the state of Michigan. And that's some of my career, and I also was a detective sergeant at a post involving general criminal activity, general crimes. And then I was a criminal justice instructor for many years at community colleges, as well as a high school career center where I taught criminal justice for many years. So that's kind of my 38 years of history with law enforcement and education.
And pardon me, and just to make sure ladies and gentlemen of the jury heard that correctly, did I hear you say 38 years?
It was 26 years in law enforcement. I retired, and then I got into education and started teaching for 12 years. And I retired from that.
And I tend to jump around a bit and just cross things off so I don't cover them more than 2 or 3 times. Given the later career experience in law enforcement, given having had the experience of taking down some significant organized crime chunks, did you ever see an example where you and your team took the head off a group, decapitated it, put John Gotti in prison? Did their positions stay unfilled?
No. I used to teach at narcotics classes around the state. Every year we put on narcotic classes, and I was part of a group that also put those classes together. And one of the cases I worked with U.S. Customs and the FBI involved a major marijuana distributor out of Texas. And we worked on that case for probably 3 years, and then I left that unit, and that case continued. And basically that case involved a man from Mexico and southern Texas, Brownsville, who was involved in shipping marijuana up from Mexico through Texas up to Michigan as one of the destination points. And that case was very lengthy, and there was 6 homicides involved in that case, execution-type homicides. And the U.S. government eventually charged the main person, Juan Garza, with a capital crime of murder, narcotics-related murder, and he was executed 2 weeks after Timothy McVeigh. Now that's about as much of a lethal cutoff of an organization as you can do, is executing someone. And despite that, and despite all the work and time in that, I'm sure that organization didn't fall apart after that. And that organization continued on, moving marijuana from Mexico through Texas up into Michigan and other states. That's an example that I was thinking of just off the top of my head.
What it reminds me of is the scene out of Men in Black where one of the agents uses a shotgun and shoots the head off the alien. The alien promptly grows a new head and says, "I hate when you do that. That really hurts."
Right. I remember that.
That seems to tell a lot of the story. Now, if we had, and this was all in the name of the policy of prohibition, fair statement?
Correct.
And we know that although the war's been going on since 1918 or 1937, and we know it's a war against people, not plants and their products, given all that, we still have Richard Nixon in the 70s coming up with the phrase, war on drugs. Let me borrow from the late Mr. Nixon, and my co-host Casper's heard me say this before, but I do have fun with it. Paraphrasing one of his phrases, if prohibition had 4 more years, would it work?
Well, I was just watching a thing on President Nixon's war on drugs announcements, and that he appointed this commission to look at drugs and the addiction of drugs in this country. And that report that came out even said we shouldn't get involved in the arresting of people for possession. Even though that report that he asked to have done, even the possession part of the drug war, they didn't recommend that he get involved in. That was a poor idea, but he obviously didn't follow their advice and continued going for the whole shebang.
My suspicion is that although in some areas he did follow some good advice, my sense of the whole thing, having lived through it and fought pretty hard against it, was that there were many situations where he was not listening to good advice. In all fairness, he had been following a policy that goes back to at least 1937 and the Narcotics Act and our friends Anslinger and Hearst and some of the true devils in our history. Let me ask you this. In 38 years of law enforcement, did you run into one case, one petty offense, one misdemeanor, one felony, one federal case? You tell me. One case involving industrial hemp fiber for fabric, for rope.
Well, first of all, it was 26 years in law enforcement, and I did education for 12 years. I was a teacher, so I had to correct that. But no, matter of fact, I'm very confused as to, hemp and marijuana. People often just say, what is the difference between the two and how they're the same? And I was reading about cannabis and indica and cannabis sativa, and I understand about the female flowering plants that actually is where you get the THC concentration, and the male plants is what they use for the rope and the other type of products. And Canada to the north obviously has a pretty big hemp program where they actually can ship the products into this country. But I think that people consider hemp and marijuana in the same way, that there's exactly the same product, but I don't know why we can't seem to educate people that they are not the same thing, and that they need to be looked at in separate ways, and have different reasons for those two products.
On the one hand, there are genetic similarities. They look very similar genetically. On the other hand, they look different. One, the tall, more slender one, being bred specifically for females and specifically for maximum amounts of one of 80 to 105 plus cannabinoids, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. And that happens to be, and the reason some are bred for that is it's the most psychoactive. It gets you the most buzz. There's cannabinol now we keep hearing, just another cannabinoid that seems to be tied with the Charlotte's Web, baby's seizure reduction and the like. And then we have a genetically closely related plant that is bred for an entirely different purpose. It is bred for, coincidentally, the lowest possible THC, in part because they don't care what sex they are. They don't care if energy goes into producing seeds or producing THC. They breed it for the strongest fiber, for the strongest stem, because that's what they want to use it for. So instead of growing it here, and the United States is very good at growing things, should we choose to, we buy it, having been grown in China, Canada, Eastern Europe primarily. And I know buying from China is, for many, not today's first choice. We buy it from them, and then we can make it into rope, then we can make it into fabric. We just can't grow it ourselves. I don't see the sanity. I'll do you, I think, a favor. I will not ask you to explain the sanity of that.
I'd appreciate that, since I have no idea what the answer would be to that. So, thank you.
Let me ask you this. If it took 3 years to put together a significant drug bust, that was more than one officer, one detective, correct?
Correct.
More than one agency?
Correct.
A large file.
Correct.
And in the end, ultimately, you took down a bunch of drug dealers, and that included, and may have had added to it, some people who committed crimes directly related to this drug business, which arguably would never have happened. And I'm looking at the 6 homicides. Would never have happened but for the underground drug business. Fair statement?
Correct.
Do you think with that amount of law enforcement energy, a single unsolved rape could have been cleared?
Definitely. And at the time when I was doing this, I felt that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, because that was in the late 80s, early 90s, when a lot of grants were being given to police agencies and look at drug interdiction. That was a kind of a popular thing at the time, was to interdict drugs, and rather than do the typical buy and move up the ladder on the buy officer thing. At the time, it seemed like I was doing good things for the community, and I don't regret what I did. It's not like I look back and say I was a bad person. It's just my perspective on it has changed over time, and I look at it differently now. And I'm not trying to say that law enforcement people who are involved in drug enforcement are doing the wrong thing or doing the bad thing. They are doing what they're supposed to do as far as they know. They're doing the things that they're hired to do and paid to do. And they don't determine necessarily if a law should be enforced or not. They are trying to do what their department says what's important, what's the priority. And so I don't have any ill feeling towards law enforcement who will do it. I have one of my students from high school who's in narcotics enforcement today, and I have another one who's down in another state doing it. So I have some of my students who I care very much about that are involved in narcotics enforcement today, and I hope they're doing what they think they should do.
When you took an oath of office to be sworn in as a Leo, as a law enforcement officer, correct?
Correct.
And you swore to follow that oath, correct?
Correct.
When they gave you that oath, do you recall a sentence that said, "Oh, by the way, I swear I will refuse to enforce any particular law that I think is just wrong"? Do you recall that being part of the oath?
I'm sure that wasn't in there.
You do recall giving your word to keep the oath?
Correct.
Do you think it's a reasonable thing? And this is a softball. This is called the lawyer testifying. Do you think it's a reasonable thing to expect somebody to respect and honor their oath?
Yes, and I think that police feel that's very important to do, and that they feel that they're out there to do that. And so I think they take their job seriously and doing what they feel they're supposed to do. That is part of the whole thing.
Did your leaders, your teachers, your instructors, did they come to you in advance and say, by the way, what language would you like in your oath?
No,
how about this? You can take an oath, but it has to, I want it to include an extra line. I know this is Texas. I know it's an Oklahoma, Utah death penalty state, but I'm telling you right now, if it's a death penalty case, I'm going to screw it up just so you can't get the death penalty. Did you get to say that?
No, and I was involved in a death penalty case in Michigan, which people say, how can you have a death penalty case in Michigan? It wasn't a narcotics case, it was a murder case, but it happened to be where the victim was found in a lake, and some federal land had gone up to this lake. So they arrested an individual under federal law for a homicide on federal land, a murder on federal land. And this individual was sentenced to death, and his presently sitting in Terry House. So when you talk about the death penalty in Michigan, which we never have had the death penalty in Michigan, it can be utilized, obviously, in the federal system in Michigan.
Let me ask you a related, unrelated question. In the systems within which you've worked, have you had the opportunity to experience over the years both minimum mandatories or mandated sentences by law and situations where sentencing was the judge's job?
Well, mainly my recollection throughout my career is using sentencing guidelines that they use for the probation officers, PSIs, pre-sentence investigations, how they determine sentencing. Obviously, there were some crimes, especially in narcotics for a while there when I worked narcotics. We liked that over 650 law because it kind of loosened up tongues quite a bit. The over 650 law was a lifer offense for certain types of drugs, cocaine, heroin, where possession of over 650 grams, less than a kilo, was a life sentence. So when we were doing interdiction work at airports, we thought that might be pretty much to our advantage, because who wouldn't want to talk if they're looking at a life sentence for a possession with intent to deliver, being a life felony. So at the time, I thought actually it was a pretty good idea at the time.
I'd like to believe that I'd never roll on anybody, but knock on easel, I never faced a life sentence. Do I really know what I do, honestly?
Well,
no, and I hope to never find out.
And we found, we had a case where a guy was trying to ship a kilo from Michigan to California through an airport, and you don't usually ship cocaine to California from Michigan. I don't know if it was a return because of dissatisfaction. It had been entered, the package had been a slight cut in it, so someone had gone in and either tasted it or tested it. I believe they probably tested it more than tasted it, and then they were shipping it back to California, and it got hung up. We did a search warrant at the airport, got the kilo, and the guy who was trying to ship it, we finally got him to come back in to claim his package, to claim his suitcase he was shipping it in. He was a young man, and he was looking at a life felony once we apprehended him and said, you're looking at a life felony here. Let's talk about who you're working for, because we knew he was a mule. And basically he said, it's too late. I can't tell you anything right now. It's too late. So basically he took the hit. In his mind, it was not worth telling us who he was working for. And he was a young man whose basically life was destroyed.
Well, my life will be destroyed if I don't pay my bills, and I got to make that happen.
Okay.
So we're going to do that right now with a commercial break, and then we're going to listen to a song about how groovy marijuana is, and then come back up and pick up where we left off here at Time for Hemp. You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
what's coming behind, looking like the road's real clear. So I drive at the pace I like, pretty slow to most of you, but very fast to me, you see. I like to walk down the middle line all the time, 'cause that's where I find my peace of mind. Chugging along in the right time. I ain't never looking back. Got to wait, got to shake on the right track. Sucking at my cup of sweet tea, I roll myself some homegrown. This is the way it should be. I'm not waiting on a phone call, lighting up the taste so sweet. Oil my machinery, my notebook I can graciously greet. Thank you to the magic greenery. That's why I lose myself in my land. Some might say I'll be sticking my head in the sand, but I ain't never looking back. You got to wait, got to shake on the right track.
Ideas. Evolution did not end with us growing thumbs. You do know that, right? Didn't end there.
No, it didn't, baby. The song you were listening to is normally a song you hear when the Doug McVeigh program starts, From Thought to Action, which is heard every Tuesday and Thursday morning right before this show from 9 to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard. Doug McVeigh is a hard-working activist and hemp journalist for a good number of years. I would encourage you to check out his program and his websites, and, of course, his bio page and archives on the timeforhemp.com website. We got a brand-new website. Please go check it out. Share it with your friends. We do a monthly online magazine. We keep it small. We keep it about 20 pages, maybe 22, so that when you download it in PDF format, you can print it out for less than $1 and share it with your friends. Many businesses will advertise in it and then print out copies and write the whole thing off on their taxes because it's promoting their business, and hand out copies to their customers or leave them laying around for their customers to read in vapor shops and medical marijuana dispensaries. Also, when you go into your favorite pipe shop or edible medical place, ask them to keep the Time for Hemp Broadcasting Network playing through their in-house speakers so everybody there that you are sharing your time with can also share taking Time for Hemp. We are celebrating LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. It is Wednesday, LEAP Day. Go to leap.cc. Find yourself a speaker to bring to your neck of the woods. We're going to get back to our joint chat with my joint host here. I would encourage you and all your friends who are jointly listening to take some joint notes while they have this joint chat with our joint guest here on Time for Hemp.
Casper, it occurs to me as your joint host that this ongoing blunt style maintained by the show, once again, I think is giving us a show that is just smoking.
Thank you.
That's pretty good there.
Ted, jumping back, you mentioned Michigan and that a lot of your roots and work and efforts I imagine Leap Speaking is in and around Michigan. Am I on track?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Would you share with us the state of affairs, at least today, because I know yesterday is different than tomorrow, but at least today? What are we seeing in Michigan?
Right now, we have a very confusing situation, mainly with marijuana, because the populace passed a resolution passing medical marijuana several years back, which created a lot of confusion because of the law that was passed was very vague and didn't have a lot of information as far as the description or definitions of what things were. And so it gave a lot of people headaches, so to speak, and both in law enforcement and in the people who were trying to be using it legitimately. So it was a big problem. Well, with all these problems came upon now we had these referendums in cities that wanted to change the law for possession and make it a civil infraction, so to decriminalize possession of marijuana. So now, most people don't know this, but actually it happened first back in 1972 in the city of Ann Arbor, which sounds like a small town, but it's the home of the University of Michigan, which is a well-known college throughout the country. Ann Arbor actually in 1972 decriminalized possession of marijuana. And that town didn't fall into the depths of hell or anything after doing that. It survived. It's a very progressive and nice city to live in. After 1972, it took several years, but in the last couple of years, many cities in Michigan, actually 13 other ones, decriminalized possession of marijuana. Cities such as Grand Rapids, Saginaw, Flint, Detroit. And when Grand Rapids actually passed an ordinance to decriminalize marijuana, the prosecutor in that county, we have county prosecutors, actually filed a suit to make that so that wouldn't apply to Grand Rapids, and he wanted the Grand Rapids police to enforce the state law and not the city law, the ordinance. Well, that went through quite a bit of things, and finally they were told that no, if the citizens of Grand Rapids want marijuana to be considered a non-crime, they have that right. So now we have people who, in Grand Rapids, who, if they have under a certain amount, technically it's a civil infraction. However, if a state police officer or county sheriff catches them, they could be charged with a state crime, which is a 1-year misdemeanor. So people in cities, it's not what they're doing, it's who catches them that makes it a different type of offense. Our criminal laws were never intended to put citizens in that position. And being in that position, to me, is extremely unfair, and it makes law enforcement, it separates them from the community even more so than they already are. And I think that creates problems.
When the 14 cities in Michigan decriminalized, in how many of them did the sky fall?
Well, as of this date, none that I know of. And actually, I was talking to the person in charge of Vice in the city of Grand Rapids, and I asked him, how are things going since marijuana has been decriminalized? And I said, have you noticed a difference in what's going on in Grand Rapids? And he said, to tell you the truth, he said, I probably wouldn't say this in public, but it's a non-issue. He said, we don't have the arrest for possession, but he said, it's almost like it's not that big a deal, and it's a non-issue. It's kind of a boring thing now. It's not an issue. So I don't know why. I know why police won't come out and say this. That it goes against. It would be hard for me to do that if I was still active, probably. But I think they admit it to themselves and to others, but they won't say it in the public eye.
In the 14 cities, have you been running into news stories, and I know they would run with it and print it for months. Have you been running into news stories suggesting that as a result of the decrim, other crimes have risen?
Matter of fact, no, it's the opposite. Crime has gone down in Michigan and a lot of the cities, and they're trying to explain it away like they normally do, with sound bites about how our community efforts are increasing, and we're having meetings, and we're having coffee with cops, which they are pretty heavy onto right now, as they're putting in the news these coffee with cops or shopping with cops on Christmas. That's an effort trying to build community relations.
Well, building community relations is a wonderful thing. One of the things that I think we can fairly say about many truly criminal types is that they really don't care about that type of education, and they really don't particularly care or perhaps have the ability to follow those wonderful rules, which weren't needed for the rest of us anyway.
Correct.
Let me ask you this, the law and order model. We talked a bit before about the time of commitment that's involved in taking a case, small case, big case, if it happens to go through the entire system. I know for a fact from seeing Law and Order that from the time of the crime being committed to the arrest of the perp, to the representation, preparation, trial, and jury verdict, I've learned that that's a 1-hour process. Every day, every week, there's no question it's a 1-hour process. What are we talking here in real life for a case that might go to trial and sentencing, where prison might be an issue, as it is in many drug crimes in many states?
Well, the system is extremely expensive to get involved in. With the law enforcement people, it's there for overtime for court, but you have attorneys who are being appointed to represent clients. You have probation officers who do pre-sentence investigations. You have the judges. You have the people who come in for... There's just a lot of things going on there. They try to make it a more streamlined, a McDonald's-type atmosphere by doing the plea bargaining. And in Michigan, it's 95% of all cases get plea bargain, which I'm sure is not uncommon in other states as well. And what Michigan does with marijuana, outside of these municipalities that have decriminalized it, it really, to me, is a screw job. I don't know how else to say it. But what they do in Michigan is possession is a 1-year misdemeanor, and use is considered to be a 90-day misdemeanor. So what they'll do is when they stop somebody on the road and they find some marijuana, or they smell marijuana smoke and they justify a search and find some marijuana, or they even ask somebody they've been smoking marijuana, they'll charge them with possession and use, both. And then when that case goes to court, the prosecutor will do, you exactly know what they'll do. They'll say, we'll drop the possession charge for 1 year. You plead to the use, a 90-day misdemeanor. They don't usually get jail time, and that's the game they play.
How long does that 90-day jail time conviction for use stick with somebody in Michigan, in the cities that haven't decrimmed?
That's going to stay with them forever, unless they have an attorney or know that there's a way to get around that by pleading under like a Section 47. I don't know if Arizona had it, but if they go under this one statute that says this is their first-time drug offense and they're under a certain age, that after a certain amount of time it will be expunged from their record. But they'll only get that if they either have an attorney or if they're knowledgeable about this particular section, which I have to say most citizens are not. So the only ones that benefit from it are ones who have either the ability to get an attorney, the funds. I don't know that a lot of them will be getting court-appointed attorneys because a lot of judges don't sentence possession cases too much jail time, and they don't have to appoint a public defender, but there's no jail time.
As far as you know, do the district attorneys, the prosecutors, have any obligation to tell a defendant that, oh, by the way, in some cases, I apply this special treatment for first-time offenders, and it might be good for you to think about that? You think that's common practice?
No, I don't think that's common practice. And that's one of the things that bothered me in law enforcement, is that people would get deals, and the people that wouldn't get deals. And the ones that wouldn't get deals usually were of certain socioeconomic status, and the hole that they got put in the criminal justice system would just keep getting deeper and deeper, and they could never seem to get their way out.
In what you saw, did you see a disparity between the treatment by the officers on the street, by the system, of people of darker colors compared with Caucasians?
That I've worked in Detroit, and I've worked in rural areas, and I think that as a police officer, I never felt that I ever arrested someone because they were black or because they weren't black, or I never felt that. But I do know, for working cases in areas where there's urban population, when you're working on a case, like I did a few years back in a murder case, and the young man was from the inner city, that when you go down to talk to people and try to investigate a case involving this, very few people are willing to talk to you, and the police look at it like, well, I can't do anything if they won't talk to me. And a lot of the violent crimes wouldn't get solved. And the police look at it like, that's not my problem if they won't talk to me. But I look at it like, well, it might not be my problem, but I want to solve this case, and I need people to talk to me, and I need to have someone trust me. And that trust between law enforcement, I don't care what agency you worked for, whether it be state, county, or city, there was a very big lack of trust through not just criminal people, but this whole inner city community. There was not a level of, I'm there to help them.
Do you think any of that lack of trust, and this is certainly a manipulative question, do you think there's anything in that lack of trust that ties itself directly to the war on drugs, the war on people? Is it at times as simple as, I would invite you in and chat about that, but I'm worried about getting shot by the crack gang next door, or by maybe you seeing the roach in my ashtray? I don't know if we're on the same side. Am I on the right track?
Yes, it is, because what happens is, I would say, I don't know what the numbers are as far as people utilizing marijuana in the inner city, or blacks versus whites who use marijuana. I know there's some numbers out there. But in urban areas where a lot of blacks live, there are more police in those areas, a lot of traffic stops involving searches, and a lot of people are arrested for possession. And I believe that creates more of an atmosphere where the police are only looking to arrest us. And I think without that could bring about a change in that area. I don't think it'll be the only solution, but I think that would be helpful.
Well, one thing that's helpful to me is paying my bills, and so in order to make that happen, we're going to take a commercial break, and then we're going to come right back in 1 minute, 43 seconds here at Time for Hemp. Listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Well, I once had a bow, good green reefer, a big fat yellow bee, much, much sweeter. Mighty don't hide it. Mighty don't hide it. Well, mighty don't hide it. Mighty don't hide it. Well, mighty don't hide it. Fire up right now.
Yeah, fire up right now. Be loud, be proud. Come out of the closet. Let everybody know that you are a marijuana smoker. You know, as long as you're sitting there trying to figure out if Niles and Frazier are going to get a date for New Year's Eve, or if, they're going to get married on Friends, I got news for you. Can you be any more part of the problem? Seriously. What you need to do is get up off that couch, put one foot in front of the other, and get out and become part of the solution by letting everybody know how important it is to end prohibition. If you need help, you can go to leap.cc and find a speaker to bring to your neck of the woods. We're going to return to this joint chat with my joint host and our joint friend here on the Big Joint broadcast at Time for Hemp.
And Casper, of course, let us all encourage people to go to leap.cc, sign up as supporters, contribute to us, contribute to Time for Hemp, contribute to Leap. We're on the same page, we're pushing in the same direction, and we each have a different part of this stone to build this pyramid. Ted, you mentioned, and for the first time I am hearing and learning about an organization or individual or organization of two people called SAM, S-A-M. Talk to me, educate me, please.
Well, I just kind of found out about this from an op-ed that was in our local paper. And Project SAM, SAM stands for Smart Approaches to Marijuana. And Dr. Kevin Sabet and former Congressman Patrick Kennedy apparently are behind this. And they have these objectives, and they're against legalizing marijuana. They have some objectives, and they state some so-called facts. Some of the objectives I really struggle with. One of them is to make sure that large alcohol and tobacco industries do not diversify to grow, distribute, market, or sell marijuana. I don't know who they think actually sells marijuana in this illicit market, whether they think it's like some wonderful organization that looks out for people's interests. That if they're worried about tobacco industries coming in and alcohol industries selling marijuana, are they thinking that's worse than the cartels that move it between Mexico and here, or other countries, whether it be Turkey or Afghanistan, with other types of drugs? I can't believe they think that these legitimate industries would be worse than what we have.
As I understand Kevin Sabat's position, there are two interesting things I'm seeing over time. One is that because in many ways he apparently is not a total idiot, his position seems to be shifting more towards the left. I think he's finding it difficult to maintain a position that is truly idiotic. As a total aside, agree, don't agree, call him on his made-up facts by knowing the reality, all the stuff we would normally do. He's not a nasty, evil man. He's just simply wrong. I've been wrong before. He's simply wrong. But don't look for the face of evil there, because I don't think you'll find it. I think you will find the expression of ignorance. And what's our enemy against ignorance? Education. Go to leap.cc. See what these numbers are. See what $1 trillion war has bought. Well, let me give you a clue. The answer is nothing. Do you know the extent of Sabat and Sam's underlying financing? Are they wealthy? Are they backed by large tobacco organizations and the like, as far as we know?
Obviously, they're not being backed by tobacco because they're saying that they don't want tobacco involved in distributing, selling marijuana. So obviously, we can look elsewhere. But I guess if you look back into Dr. Sabat's history and who he's been involved with as far as the organization, there's a couple people that he's been involved with that had an interesting program when it came to drug use or homosexual behavior by young people, and that was a project where they would take children in and try to force them into this, changing their ways about smoking marijuana or their sexual preference. And Sabat has some links to that. I'm not saying he was directly working with them, but there's definitely links to that. And I did see something that I thought was pretty credible about money that was given to Sam from those two people or that group who were involved in that type of program.
And let's jump to the beginning and end of where we're going. From 25 years in law enforcement, from years of teaching, what is it that brought you from being at one point a narcotics interdiction officer to being a LEAP speaker advocating for the legalization and regulation of all of these drugs, the safer ones, the more dangerous ones? That's quite a leap, so to speak. How'd you get there?
Well, it wasn't an immediate thing. However, I knew nothing about LEAP as an organization. In my mind, LEAP was law enforcement assistance, a law enforcement assistance program, which I received money to go to college when I was a young police officer, and that's what LEAP, I think it was LEEP actually, is what helped me go to college when I was a police officer. And that was based on that 1967 Commission on Crime that Lyndon Johnson came up with back in 1967. And one of the recommendations was to give more education to law enforcement. So LEAP to me was not what I thought it was. My son, who's a social activist, contacted me one day and said, "Have you ever heard of LEAP?" I said, "Yeah, I got college money to go to school." He said, "No, LEAP." And I said, "No." He said, "Go online and take a look and see what you think." I went online to the LEAP and I read a lot of the articles, and all of my experience in teaching and talking to kids about drugs and alcohol, and all of a sudden, when I read all these things, it was like an epiphany that all of a sudden said, why are we still doing the same thing over and over and over again, even though it is not working? And I started looking at the statistics about how many people use drugs today and how many people used them 40 years ago. And what has changed? The price of drugs, the purity of drugs, the overdoses of heroin, the more heroin we have now in rural areas than we ever had before. All of these things, and I said, what the hell is going on? Where have I been? I felt like I missed the boat. And all of a sudden, I jumped on the boat.
Well, see, you should have gone the 4 more years, like the late President Nixon said, 4 more years. He would have won that war, just 4 more years. Maybe 8 more years. Or 16. Or how about never
Well, and some I wonder sometimes who really wants it to end. I don't know. I'm trying to think now, other than LEAP and the citizens. I think the citizens are saying we're going to end it by doing these referendums in these cities, and I'm sure Michigan is going to be on a statewide ballot referendum in 2016 if they can get the signatures to put it on the ballot to legalize it in Michigan.
Well, I'm going to end it, too, because we are at the end of the hour, so it's time to give a shout-out to our favorite URLs and any hardworking organization that you want to put a spotlight on. We'll start with our joint guest first. That's a clue. That when I say when we start with our joint guest first, that's a clue for you to open up and say something wonderful about your URL or someone you want to put a spotlight on.
Lenny, that's you, right?
Ted.
That's me?
Yes, are you our joint guest?
Yes, I'm your joint guest. I'm sorry.
Is there someone you want to put a spotlight on? This is a talk show. When I ask a question, please don't shut up.
I apologize. I just didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't sure you were talking to me, and so I just kind of lost that. Repeat your question if you could.
Who do you want to put a spotlight on, and is there a website you want people to go to? Does that work for you?
Yeah, well, the LEAP website obviously is an important website I want people to go to see what LEAP is doing and to help LEAP out with its promoting this prohibition, getting rid of this prohibition against all drugs, not just marijuana. And that was, I think, Lenny said it was leap.cc?
Yes.
Okay.
Leap.cc. And I, too, as always, almost, will give a shout-out to Leap.cc, a shout-out to my wife, Debbie Dodge, and, as I am happy to do, to all of the organizations working as a team, ColoradoNormal.org, Normal.org, SSDP, MPA, DPP, Leap.cc. None of these people could do this alone, and look what we have done together. We have won another war, and now we have to win the peace. Thanks, Casper.
And I want to remind people that we are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, broadcasting about the need to end prohibition. I want to encourage you to share us with all your friends. And remember, absolutely, positively, the next time you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and spend some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for hemp. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison